the Bhagavad Gita. Last time we finished the third chapter, so we will start with the fourth chapter, which is Transcendental Knowledge. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Virupam Sadrajatam Sahamunaragunatam Vitam Tam Sujivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Pada Sahaguna Lalita Sri Vishakha Vitamsya Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Namami Hari Priya Vancha Kalpatarubhayasya Kripa Sindhubhya Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we'll start with the first verse of chapter 4. The personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna said, I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god Vivashvan, and Vivashvan instructed it to Manu, the father of mankind, and Manu in turn instructed it to Ikshvaku. So this particular verse, it looks like a non sequitur, in the sense that in chapter 3, Krishna is talking about karma, and he suddenly begins the fourth chapter by saying, Imam Vivashvate Yogam Koktavanam Abhyaman, that I spoke this to Vivashvan, and takes a little bit of unwrapping to see the trend that Krishna is following over here. So if you see that in the third chapter, Krishna started off by answering the question. So in the third chapter, Krishna started off.
It's getting covered.
By speaking about karma, right? So Arjuna had asked, which is better, karma or gyan? And Krishna says, karma. And he gives various reasons. You need to sustain yourself, your senses are active. And but one thing that we do see is that every time Krishna is speaking about karma, he is also establishing the context for gyan. So like one of the first things that he tells Arjuna is, you have to do your prescribed duty. So how does one know what one's prescribed duty is? The scriptures tell us, right? Because anything else is whimsical. Then later on, Krishna briefly introduces the aspect of Nishkam karma. which is karma on the platform of the knowledge of soul. And then so Krishna again introduces the concept of knowledge. Then in 3:30, and this is just one verse, but Krishna kind of leaves it over there, where he says that you fight in full knowledge of me. Right? He says, Mai sarvani karmani sanyasadatma chetesha nirasi nirmamo bhutva yuddhasva viktasara. He says, Mai sarvani karmani sanyasadatma chetesha. Chetesha means in full consciousness of me. And finally, when Arjuna asks Krishna that why is it that people commit sinful activities, then he talks about the core cause, which is lust. And then he says the lust sits in your senses, it sits in your mind, it sits in your intelligence. And the last verse in the 3rd chapter is that with the weapon of knowledge, slay this eternal enemy of lust. So he has been, in a subtle way, he has been putting karma in the context of Gyan. So in this chapter, he wants to bring Gyan more in the forefront. So he begins off by what is considered to be the epistemological section, part of the section, that instead of speaking directly about knowledge, he is speaking about the knowledge about knowledge. That where do you get this knowledge from? What is the process of getting this knowledge? So he begins off by saying that everything that I am telling you and that I will be telling you, it's not something new age. It's not something that I'm making up as we are standing in the middle of the battlefield and having this conversation. It is something that is ancient. And to establish its timeline, he says that I spoke this to Vivashwan, the sun god. Prabhu, I don't think that's needed. It's okay. Thank you. So he spoke to Vivashwan, the sun god. In the purport, Prabhupada does a little bit of a time scale rating, and he says that, which means that the Bhagavad Gita, that Krishna is referring, this conversation that Krishna is referring to was about 120 million years ago. And then he says Vivashwan spoke to his son Manu, to Vaivashta Manu, and then Manu spoke to his son Ikshvaku. So Ikshvaku is a king in the Suryavansh. So the dynasties that we have for the Kshatriyas are either Suryavanshi or Chandravanshis. So here he is talking about the Suryavanshi. That I spoke it to the sun god, who spoke it to Manu, who spoke it to a king in the Suryavanshi. So he's establishing the fact that this is an ancient, timeless knowledge, and he's also establishing the fact that it has been coming through a disciplic succession. So he's making this two facts. So these facts are important because when Krishna is trying to establish a succession for knowledge, he wants to make sure that these aspects are preserved.
I have a question here. Is there any reference anywhere as to when Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita to the sun god, the last one? What was happening? I mean, there was a reason when he spoke, or it was just he was passing on knowledge?
Good question. I don't think there's a reference. At least not that I'm aware of. That there is a pastime there. Second verse. This supreme science was received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it appears to be lost. So now Krishna is establishing the context of why is he speaking the Gita now. So he said, I spoke it to the sun god millions of years ago. It was coming to disciplic succession, but now that succession appears to be broken. So in the Mahabharata there is a pastime of that explains why this knowledge was lost. So this happened in Satyug time, there is a sage by the name of Gautam Rishi. Gautam Rishi is one of the very ancient sages, son of Brahma, I believe son of Brahma, one of the Saptarishis, married to Ahalya. And he once performed austerities in the Dantakaranya forest, and Lord Brahma gave him some special plants and seeds that would always bloom. So Gautam Rishi, he established an ashram for himself, and with his plants and seeds he had a very beautiful ashram with ever flowering and blooming trees and plants, and many sages were there performing yajna. So as time went on, at the time of Yuga Sandhi, when one yuga changes to another, so in the Bhagavatam it is explained that it is a time of lot of turmoil. There is floods, and there is famine, and there is drought. So it so happened at this particular Yuga Sandhi there was widespread drought. So the Brahmins from everywhere, they came to the ashram of Gautam Rishi because he had that special benediction that his plants would never dry up. So they came to the ashram of Gautam Rishi and they took shelter of him, and Gautam Rishi was very happy to have so many Brahmins coming and a lot of Krishna Katha and yajna being done. So in due course of time, when the influence of the Yuga Sandhi subsided, then the Brahmins, they wanted to go back to their respective ashrams. But Gautam Rishi was so affectionate and such a gracious host that he would not let them go. So every time they would say that we have to go, he would say, you go tomorrow. And the next day he would again say, no, just stay a few more days, go next week, you do this festival and then go. And finally the Brahmins, they started getting very tired. They're like, we can't just stay here forever. So they devised a scheme. And between them, they constructed an image that looked just like a cow. And they put it on the path of where Gautam Rishi in the morning would walk to do his morning oblations. So Gautam Rishi, when he was walking in the morning, it was early morning, it was still Brahma Muhurta time, it was dark. So he kicked over that image that was put. And then all the Brahmins who were waiting around, they said, oh, you killed a cow. We can't stay in the ashram of one who is a cow killer. And they quickly went away. So then Gautam Rishi was mortified that how could I have killed a cow? And then by his mystic powers, he understood what had happened. So he got very angry, and then he cursed the Brahmins that all the knowledge that you have will be lost. So because of the curse of the Brahmin, the Vedic knowledge disappeared. And that is why it is said that in this particular yuga, Srila Vyasadeva did not compile the Vedas, he actually wrote the Vedas. Because of the curse of Gautam Rishi, the Vedas were actually lost. And that is why the Vyasadeva in this particular yuga is an expansion of Krishna. Because Krishna himself is the original cause of the Vedas. In the other yugas, Vyasadeva is still there, but he does the job of compiling the Vedas, which means that the Vedas are there, but they are like one large piece of literature. And what Vyasadeva does, because the people in the age of Kali cannot handle the length and breadth, so he divides it into the 4 Vedas, he divides it into Shruti and Smriti, he writes the Vedanta Sutra, he divides it into Nyaya, and he compiles the Puranas. So it's like, and we have experience of that. If you're dealing with a large body of literature, we try and divide it into smaller parts, and then he made different sages in charge of various parts. But in this particular yuga, it is said that Krishna Dwapayan Vyasadeva, he actually wrote the scriptures because of the influence of the curse of Gautam Rishi. So this is one of the reasons why Krishna is saying that particular knowledge that had been there since time immemorial has been lost, and now I am speaking it again to you.
So the word science used here versus Vedic knowledge, is there a specific significance of science word used here?
So this is Prabhupada's emphasis on the fact that spirituality is a science. That so Prabhupada would explain that the nature of science is that if you do the things that you are asked to do, the result will always be the same. That's the nature of science. You do an experiment, if you do everything as per the specifications, you'll always get the same result. Now we never got it in our labs, so so that's a different thing. But that's the nature of science. So Prabhupada emphasized, because people tend to mistake spirituality with sentimentality, which means that there is a lot of ambiguity, that you do the same thing, I do the same thing, you get a different result, I get a different result. So they go into all the notion of bhav, and which is there at later stages. But Prabhupada wanted to emphasize that spirituality is a science. So he always tends to translate it as spiritual science. Yeah? Third?
Refer that Bhagavad Tattva Vijnana, like in the scriptures also it is mentioned as science.
Yes. Yeah. Third verse, that very ancient science of the relationship with the Supreme is today told by me to you, because you are my devotee as well as my friend, and can therefore understand the transcendental mystery of this science. So Krishna here is giving a little bit of sense of what is the qualification of one who can receive this knowledge. And he says that because you are my devotee and my friend. And Prabhupada in the purport writes that one has to be favorable to Krishna to understand Bhagavad Gita. One may not be a devotee per se, but one at least has to be favorable. If people read Bhagavad Gita from the perspective of what can I get out of it to explain the science of management or the science of handling domestic disputes, then you're basically using Krishna just as another source of knowledge. But in order to understand Bhagavad Gita, your heart has to be open to Krishna. Prabhupada speaks about this in the purport also, that whether your faith is strong or soft, at least you have to read it in a mood that you're favorable to Krishna. Otherwise you will not be able to. The whole Bhagavad Gita will continue to be a whole mystery for you. Next verse. Arjun said, the sun god Vivaswan is senior by birth to you. How am I to understand that in the beginning you instructed this science to him? So this verse is a little bit of, so this verse kind of disrupts the flow of the chapter a little bit. Because what Krishna's intention is that he wants to glorify the knowledge that he is speaking and then give access to the Gyan aspect of what he will be speaking. But what Arjun has done is that he has cast doubts on the authenticity of the statement that Krishna has made. So Krishna is saying, I spoke to Vivaswan. Now Arjun knows enough to know that Vivaswan is very ancient. So, and Krishna and Arjun are contemporaries. So they are about the same age. So Arjun is asking this question, that how am I to understand that you spoke this knowledge to Vivaswan? So this question, it forces Krishna to speak about himself. So even though at this point he really, so Krishna doesn't really speak about himself till the 7th chapter. So he builds the reference, but because Arjun asked this question and he does not want to leave this question hanging, so we'll see that Krishna speaks a few verses about himself, and then we'll see how Krishna uses that. So Krishna is an expert communicator. So even though this is the acharyas say a little unexpected, but Krishna uses this to give the message that he was planning to give to Arjun. So, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. So Krishna says, the personality of Godhead said, many, many births both you and I have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot, O subduer of the enemy. So the first point Krishna is making is that you are evaluating me according to your own framework. So Arjun remembers only from the time of his own birth, and he's projecting that same framework on Krishna, that you can only remember from the time that you were born. At the time of the Mahabharata, both Arjun and Krishna, they were around 90 years old. So he's like, you cannot really remember anything beyond that. So Krishna is, first, he is disambiguating that assumption. He said that you are thinking that every time you take birth, you forget everything from your previous birth. That's true for you, but it's not true for me. So it is said that knowledge is a symptom of soul, and the destruction of knowledge is a symptom of body. That is why we tend to forget. The spiritual soul remembers everything. It does not forget. Actually, even the subtle body remembers everything. I remember once I had this back and forth with my Guru Maharaj, that the mind intelligence and false ego is a component of the subtle body, and all your memories are actually stored in your mind or intelligence. So which means that our subtle body is carrying all the memories that we have had ever since we came to the material world. Whether we were a demigod, whether we were Brahma, whether we were an animal, whether we were a Rakshasa, a human being, all that memory is stored in the subtle body. And then I was asking Guru Maharaj that how can we access it? And he was saying, don't you have enough problems with your current memories that you want memories from your previous life? You have problems with one wife, you want more wives from your previous lives to come? So, and then on a more serious, yeah. Well, he didn't say why. He said family. He said family. He said, you have one family and now you'll have so many families to deal with. And then he said, you would actually go crazy if you try and live, have access to all the memories in your previous life. So it is actually Krishna's mercy. But it is also said that when we go back to the spiritual world, then all those memories come back to us. And when we are heading back out of the material world into the spiritual world, we have access to all those memories before we give up the subtle body.
So all those memories of this world.
Of the material world, yeah. Yeah. Lots of memories.
It was fine. You're listening on the way.
Okay, next verse. Verse 6. Although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all living beings, and by my internal energy, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. So Krishna over here, so Arjun might say that in the second chapter, you told me that even I am eternal. I am a soul, I am never, nainam chindati shastrani, nainam dhati pavaka, that I am never destroyed, that na jayate, na mriyate, that the soul never takes birth, never dies. So he might think that Krishna and I, they're kind of same, that he is also eternal, I am also eternal. So Krishna makes this point, the difference between you and I is that I am in my original form that never deteriorates. That you are a jiva, I am the Lord of all the living entities. That your position is subservient to me. And then the third point that he makes is that by my internal energy, I appear. So the difference between Krishna and Jiva is, Krishna comes by his will, we are forced to come. Krishna disappears by his will, we are forced to die. So that's why when Janmashtami is celebrated, we say that it is the appearance day of Krishna. We don't really say it's the birthday of Krishna, because Krishna does not take a birth. We take birth because of the forces of karma. Because forces of karma, we are forced to take a body, and because of the same forces, we are forced to give up a body. So we take birth and we die. But great acharyas who are coming here just to preach to us, or Krishna, or great personalities, we celebrate their appearance day and their disappearance day.
But Prabhuji, generally like in India we say like Krishna Janmabhoomi, Ram Janmabhoomi, right? So Janm is like birth, right? Yeah, what appearance like?
It's understood to be more of colloquial use.
Okay.
That because not everybody is steeped in the philosophy.
Right.
So even in India, Janmashtami is Janmashtami, like it's Krishna's birth. Right. But we understand philosophically that Krishna never takes birth. So the next verse is one of the famous verses of the Bhagavad Gita, the Yada Yada Hi Dharmasya Glane Bhakti Bharata. So whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharat, and a predominant rise of irreligion, at the time I descend myself. So in the previous verse, Krishna had said that I descend. So Arjun might ask, then why do you descend? So Krishna in the next two verses gives that answer, that I descend that because whenever there is a decline in religious practice and there is a rise of irreligion. And the next verse is the Paritranaya Sadhunam Vinashaya Cha Dushkritam, to deliver the pious and to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to re-establish the principles of religion, I myself appear millennium after millennium. So Krishna gives three reasons for his descent: to annihilate the miscreants, to establish the principles of religion, and to protect his devotees. And the acharyas say that of these three reasons, the main reason that Krishna comes is the third reason, that he comes for his devotees. Everything else he can delegate. He can annihilate the miscreants through his energies. He can establish the principles of religion through his devotees. But in order to give personal association to his devotees, he actually comes.
So, why in this verse we have used pious instead of devotees, even though it's kind of implicit, but we say even when we do pious activities and we're not doing bhakti, then it's not the same result, right?
Right. Good question. So Sukriti is again, it's like Mukti. It's a term that is context sensitive. So there is Karma Anumukhi Sukriti, which is Sukriti that you get by things like giving in charity or following the principles of prescribed duties. There is Jnana Anumukhi Sukriti and there is Bhakti Anumukhi Sukriti. So we understand that Bhakti comes from, so when we say that Bhakti comes from Sukriti, then we are saying Bhakti Anumukhi Sukriti. Like they say that somebody accidentally gives obeisances to the deities, right? So that is Bhakti. So it is Agyat Sukriti, but still it is Bhakti, right? But if somebody gives in charity, that Sukriti will not result in Bhakti, right? So Krishna has briefly described his glories, so to speak, his position, his mission, and then now he basically says that what is the advantage of one who knows it? He says, Janma Karma Cha Me Divyam, that one who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjun. So,
People in the back cannot hear you. You have to be louder.
okay, should I sit over there?
They'll have to speak loudly.
I think there are a lot of places there. So
So Krishna is making this point that when one understands how great God is, one automatically surrenders. So that is one of the reasons why we see there is a lot of glorification of Krishna. A lot of Krishna's glorification is done by Krishna himself. And it's not that he's like conceited or that he's looking for adulation. He is looking for adulation, but he's not conceited. The real reason he does it is because he wants to inspire love and devotion in others. When Krishna says, I am great, and then you say, yes, Krishna, you're great, then the process of bhakti has begun. So Krishna says, Janma karma cha me devyam yo me veti tattva. The one who understands the tattva. Tattva is again, tattva is science. The one who understands this science about my greatness, he does not take birth again, but he comes to my abode. So he attains liberation into the spiritual world. Next verse. Being free from attachment, fear and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me. So this is a higher form of liberation. So in the previous form he said that they attained my abode. So attaining the abode is called Salokya Mukti, that you live in the same in the same abode as Krishna. This is you get this is bhav. Krishna says that you actually develop spontaneous love for me, and for this he has a little bit of more conditions over here. Being fully absorbed and taking refuge in me. Fully absorbed means Krishna ek sharan, that nobody else but Krishna is your protector and the object of your love. And he speaks about three impediments. He says that being freed from attachment, fear and anger, which is rag, bhai and krodh. So in the purport, Prabhupada talks about what happens to people who are not freed from this. He says that people who are very much attached, rag, they tend to become, if they are pursuing spirituality, they tend to become impersonalists. Then people who are very much in the mode of fear. So bhai comes is understanding is that people fear relationships because they have gone through many relationships and the relationships continue to frustrate them. So they say that done with relationships. So when they're told about spirituality, they cannot fathom having a relationship with God. So they become voidist, shunyavadis. And anger is when people are presented with many conflicting philosophies and they get confused. So finally out of anger they reject everything and they become atheists. So Prabhupada explains that these three things, they guide the spiritualist, misguide the spiritualist into different destinations there. But once one is freed of these vitarag, bhaya, krodha, when one is freed of these three and one takes exclusive shelter of Krishna in a mood of love, then one attains Krishna's love himself. So, yes.
Attachment, what happens? The problem? Who they will become?
So with attachment they become impersonalists.
Impersonal voidist and
Atheist.
Atheists.
How they become impersonalist? To fear, I could understand. Because out of fear of fear.
So impersonalist, what Prabhupada explains is that when somebody is very much attached to the bodily conception, then they translate that into what is known as Virat Purush. That is Krishna's universal form, right? Because they will not accept Krishna in a form like their own, because God has to be different, but they are attached to a form. So Krishna in the Bhagavatam, he appears as what is known as Virat Purush. which is the universal form, in which it is said that like the sun and the moon are his eyes, the trees in the forest are the hair on his body, the rivers are the veins, and so it basically helps one look at the universe as different parts of Krishna. Yeah. So the 11th verse is actually a very famous verse. Ye tha mam prapadyante tam sathe vibhajamyam mam vartamanu vantante manushya partha sarvashaha. As all surrender unto me, I reward accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of Pritha. So in the last two verses, Krishna spoke about devotees. So then one may question that what about the non-devotees? So Krishna is making that point that regardless of whether you're a devotee or a non-devotee, everybody surrenders unto me. And there's another reason also Krishna is making this point, which will be revealed later on in the chapter. But right now, he's addressing Arjun's doubt about Krishna's divinity. So he's making this point that I would not really be a god if I only had a small group of people under my dominion. Like many times they say there cannot be a Christian god or a Muslim god or a Buddhist god, because by definition God has to be universal. So God is not only for the devotees, He's also for the people who have not taken shelter of Him. And how does he relate to them? He reciprocates to them in the mood that they approach Him. So Kamsa, he was looking upon Krishna as death personified. Krishna came to him as death. The gopis, they were looking at Krishna as the object of their love, and Krishna became the object of their love. Shishupal, he looked upon Krishna with envy, and Krishna reciprocated in the same mood and killed him. So Krishna is the essence of all the rasas. There is no rasa that is not there in Krishna, whether it is that of love or ghastliness or parental or vatsalya. All the rasas are there in Krishna. So any way that you approach, mood that you approach Krishna in, Krishna will reciprocate. So these two verses, actually verse 4:11, Yetha mam prapadyante, and in the 9th chapter, Krishna, in the 9:29, he says, Samoham sarvabhuteshu na me dveshasti na priya. That he says, I'm equal to everybody. Krishna again speaks about his mood when relating to everybody. I'm equal to everybody. Na me dveshasti na priya. I don't envy anybody, and I don't like anybody. Na priya. But he says, one who is my devotee, for him I have special affection. So he makes that exception clause.
Prabhu, I have a question in here. And in verse 3, there is a distinction between the devotee and the non-devotee considering the Vedic instruction. But here it says devotion takes over the Vedic instructions, because Bhagavad Gita is Gita is nothing different than Krishna himself. So why is the distinction between the third and then all of a sudden when you come down to 11, it's all about devotion and the way you approach Krishna?
I actually did not understand your question. Can somebody explain it to me, maybe? Hari Prabhu.
Can you dare?
So let's break it up. So you're saying in the third verse,
Yes.
Krishna is making a distinction between devotees and
And the non-devotees for receiving the Vedic instructions. And in verse 10 and 11, and there is a blanket of devotion for both devotees as well as non-devotees.
I don't read it that way, Mataji, because in 10 he explicitly says that being fully absorbed and taking refuge of me. So that's the characteristic of a devotee, right? 9 and 10, they exclusively speak about devotees. From the 11th verse, he starts speaking about those who are not devotees. So when he talks about Janma Karma Cha Me Divyam, when he says that one who understands the divine nature of my appearance, and after establishing that context, he continues to speak about those who are favorable to him. From 11th onward, so 11th and 12th and 13th, they speak about those who are not devotees. The 11th is kind of the fulcrum verse because it speaks about both. So he's been speaking about devotees. 11th he speaks about both. Ye thamam prapadyante. That if you are a devotee, I reciprocate to you as the Supreme Lord, as your shelter. If you are a non-devotee, I appear to you as death personified. But he's casting a net that covers both. From the 12th verse onwards, he speaks about those who do not surrender to him. Does that help?
I think in verse 3 also, he said, why I am saying it to you? Because you are my devotee and I'm just reading it.
Yeah.
So, what you are explaining 11 onwards for devotees and non-devotees, and here it's not just because it's devotees, why I am explaining it to you only and not to anyone else.
Yeah, the
That's what he's
qualification.
emphasizing
Yeah,
on.
what are the qualifications?
Yeah.
Yeah. Verse 12, men in this world desire success in fruitive activities and therefore they worship the demigods. Quickly, of course, men get results from fruitive work in this world. So this is a person who is not a devotee. A person who has taken shelter of the devas, and the fact that Krishna places it adjacent to 411 says that even though they have taken shelter of the devas, ultimately I am reciprocating. I am the one that is giving them through the agency of the devas, but they have not approached Krishna directly. So these are people who are, Prabhupada has a name for them, I forget the Sanskrit, but these are people who are pious, but they take exclusive shelter of the devas. They do not take shelter of Krishna.
Only one clarification.
Uh-huh.
There was a mention of religion in one of the previous verses, that I come to resurrect the religion,
Yeah.
and worshipping anybody else is not religion. Is that the understanding? Other than Krishna, it's not exclusive worship of Krishna. Is that away from religion?
That is still religion.
It's still religion.
Yeah, because everything that comes from the Vedas is religion. So all the worship of the devas, it is religion, but there is primary and secondary religion. There is constitutional dharma and there is conditional dharma. So constitutional dharma is savai pumsha paro dharmo yato bhakti radhoksajay. That your intrinsic quality of the soul, savai pumsha paro dharmo. Paro dharmo means this is dharma that is over and above all the dharma, right? But still, it is dharma. It's still conditioned dharma. As a husband, you have a duty. As a father, you have a duty. As a citizen, you have a duty. So they are all considered to be aspects of secondary dharma. They are also part of religion.
So Krishna is okay if everybody is following different religion.
He is never okay with that, even though he gives it. But he gives it because their people have different propensities. He knows that there are some people who will never surrender to him, but he does not want to leave them and become irreligious. So he gives them principles of religion. It's like if you're a head of an household, you can run the household with love. That there is full understanding, love. Your children understands you, your wife understands you, and everything runs ecstatically, right? So that is one way. If that is not there, if you have a child that is rebellious, if you have a wife that doesn't understand you, then how do you run the household? You establish rules and regulations. You don't spend so much money. You come back house at this time. You get up in this time. So you establish rules and regulations, right? Now they are not really in place of love, right? But they are there because love is not there. So when a person does not have bhakti for Krishna, then in order to maintain order, Krishna gives the principles of religion, right? Verse 13, this is another famous verse. Chapter 4 has a lot of famous verses. This is Chaturvarnya Maya Seshta Guna Karma Vibhasha. That according to the three modes of material nature and the work associated with them, the four divisions of human societies are created by me. And although I am the creator of this system, you should know that I am yet the non-doer, being unchangeable. So Krishna makes this point that what about the people who do not surrender to him, who do not have that notion of following Krishna directly? So for them he says, Chaturvarnya Maya Sreshta. So this is the secondary principles of dharma that we were talking about. That what does the Chaturvarnyam tell you? That the Chaturvarnyam is like a 4x4 matrix. That you are a Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, you are a Brahmachari, Grahastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyas. Wherever you fall in there, I am a Grahastha and I am a Vaishya, these are the responsibilities that are there. I am a Brahmachari and I am a Brahman, these are the responsibilities that are there. They do not primarily nourish one's Krishna consciousness, but they can lead one to that path eventually. So over here, Krishna says one thing that is interesting, that he says, you should know that yet I am the non-doer, being unchangeable. So as we had discussed earlier, that Krishna speaking about himself was a bit of a detour, because Arjun said that he said, aparam, he calls Krishna aparam compared to Vivashvan. So aparam also means inferior. It also means that you are younger, but it also means that you are inferior. So Arjun was having doubts about even Krishna's credentials to speak the Bhagavad Gita. So that is why Krishna speaks a few verses where he talks about himself and his mission. But what he does over here also is that, and this is where Krishna's expertise comes in, that the main purpose of speaking these set of verses to Arjun is to transition Arjun from the platform of karma to jnana. Now, one of the main requirements for jnana is detachment. So that is why Krishna at the end of this verse he says, you should know that yet I am the non-doer, being unchangeable. So one might think that based on the previous verses, Krishna is doing so much. He's coming yuge and paritranaya sadhunam, vinashaya dushkritam, he's annihilating the miscreants, he is protecting devotees, he's re-establishing religion, and then he says, ye yathamam prapadyante, that I am reciprocating to everybody. So one would say Krishna is really busy. So much he's constantly doing. There are trillions of souls, and with every soul, Krishna is reciprocating. Either direct, one might say that okay, Krishna is only dealing with devotees, but he says no, I'm even dealing with those who are not directly surrendering to me. So each and every person, each and every soul, I am reciprocating to. But then he says, I am yet the non-doer, who is unchangeable. So Krishna puts it over there for Arjun to. So Arjun does not ask an explicit question, but it is for Arjun to think that how can Krishna, doing so much, become the non-doer, and how can he be unchangeable? So any thoughts on that?
Because he is non-doer, because he is not directly acting. He created a system because there is nobody outside the kingdom of God. So in that way we are in a way forced to be in his kingdom.
Okay.
So Varnashrama is also his institution. So it is like both ways. In that way he is a doer, but actually he is non-doer because he is not actually acting. We are acting based on our desires.
Okay.
So in that way we are doer.
Okay. Good. Any other thoughts?
Prabhuji, isn't it the case that at this point he's becoming a god from becoming a friend or a relative of Arjun, he's now showing a bigger, a more
Complete picture.
godly version of him. That he's slowly showing things that normal human beings or jivas would not be able to accomplish.
Okay, good point. Any other thoughts?
Is infinite.
He's infinite. Okay. Okay.
And, another reason I am thinking Krishna is mentioning he is unchangeable because he is beyond the modes of nature and the varnashrama system being.
Okay. So I think we are all saying we're heading in the right direction, but the real reason why Krishna says that he is the non-doer and unchangeable is because he is fully detached. He is doing everything, but he has no attachment to everything. So he creates the Chaturvarnyam, right? But he does not sit along and say how many people have become Brahman and Kshatriya. He doesn't care. Care is a different word, but it doesn't. He's not forcing. He's not saying you become Brahman and you become Kshatriya and not enough Vaishyas. I'm very concerned there's not enough Vaishyas. But he has created that system in response to the propensity of us. But he does not force anybody to take it. If somebody takes it, it's okay. If somebody does not take it, it's okay. And everything else that Krishna is also doing, that he's annihilating the miscreants and he's establishing religion, it does not change him because he is not personally invested in it. So Krishna brings forth this tattva of detachment in a subtle way, so to transition into what he actually wanted to speak to Arjuna. So the purpose of Krishna in this chapter was to speak about detachment. So first he spoke about the glories of Bhagavad Gita to establish faith in Arjuna, that what you are hearing is bona fide, it's ancient, and it has been tried and accepted by great souls. Krishna also at this point, because Krishna could have said that in the first chapter, or rather in the second chapter when he spoke, but at this point Krishna is going to be speaking about things that are not subject to one's empirical observation. So he needs that faith in Arjuna. So he needs Arjuna to make that leap of faith. The only way Arjuna can make it is if he trusts what Krishna is saying. So as we go later down the chapter, we'll say that Krishna will put forth a really wonderful concept, but it has to be accepted on faith. It cannot be accepted through empirical understanding. So in order to do that, he glorifies the Bhagavad Gita, he glorifies himself, and in glorifying himself, he has also put forth a key aspect of himself, which is detachment. So Krishna is supposed to have is full in 6 qualities. That he is the most powerful, he is the most beautiful, he is the, well, I was hoping to have that as a 6th quality. So he has full knowledge, and he has all fame. He has fame. So he has wealth, beauty, fame, strength, and supporting all this is that he is fully renounced. So this quality of renunciation is complete and intrinsic in Krishna. So the 14th verse is Krishna giving a little bit more insight. He is saying, there is no work that affects me, nor do I aspire for the fruits of action. One who understands this truth about me does not become entangled in the fruitive reactions of work. So Krishna is saying that I am fully detached. One who understands this quality of detachment and practices it will not get entangled in the fruitive reactions of work. The fruitive reaction of the work is the most dangerous thing that happens in this material world. Every activity that we do, we spin a thread that binds us to the material world. whether we are doing pious activities or impious activities. Every activity that we are doing, it is spinning a thread that binds us to this material world. And that is why Krishna is saying that through this process of detachment, we can stop this spinning of threads around us and this material world.
So, Prabhuji,
Yes, Prabhuji?
In the previous verse, by telling Krishna that I am detached, he is asking Arjuna to be detached.
He at this point, yes, he's putting that quality. Ultimately, he wants to inspire Arjun to develop that quality. At this point, he's not like preaching to Arjun, you be detached. What Krishna does is that he puts the quality of detachment and then he glorifies it.
Okay.
So through that glorification, one gets this desire to absorb it, right? So let's assume there is somebody that you really admire, right? And the person says that this is a quality that is very dear to me. And not only is it dear to me, but this is how it has helped me. So you'll go back from home after that conversation thinking that I should develop this quality. So Krishna has shown that quality in himself, right? And Krishna is God and he's glorified that quality. So it automatically, the idea is that he should inspire Arjun to take to that quality. Verse 15, all the liberated souls in ancient times acted with this understanding of my transcendental nature. Therefore, you should perform your duty following in their footsteps. So now, Krishna is putting a little bit of peer pressure on Arjun. He is saying that all the liberated souls in ancient times. So this quality of vairagya, that it is so important in making advancement that it has been practiced by liberated. So he uses the word liberated souls, not conditioned souls. It's followed by liberated souls since time immemorial. And now he is telling Arjun that you should try and emulate that quality. So we also see Krishna's, so sometimes we think that Krishna is boasting, but we see Krishna's humility over here. That Krishna initially said that I am renounced. And if he is God, he should say that is good enough for you. I am Krishna, I am the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this quality is in me, that's good enough for you. But we see Krishna's humility here, that he is now giving the reference of other liberated souls. That if I don't inspire you, let them be the source of your inspiration. So the next, from 16 to 24, the next set of verses are one of the most complicated verses, because when you're doing gyan, especially when you're looking at transition from karma to gyan, the transition is complicated. So I would request you to give me your full attention so that we can follow Krishna's logic over here. So verse 16 is, even the intelligent are bewildered in determining what is action and what is inaction. Now I shall explain to you what action is, knowing which you will be liberated from all misfortune. So Krishna is tapping Arjun on the shoulder and saying, pay attention now. I am going to tell you something really important. And what's the context? He is saying, I am going to tell you the difference between action and inaction. Action is karma. Inaction is gyan. So he's saying that I am now going to tell you the relationship between karma and gyan. Verse 17, the intricacies of action are very hard to understand. Therefore, one should properly know what action is, forbidden action is, and inaction is. So, he divides karma into three categories. One is karma, the second is vikarma, and the third is akarma. So, karma is activities that are performed according to one's prescribed duties. So they are sakam, You do your duty. They're pious activities, but they are activities that result in reactions because they're material activities. Vikarma is sinful activities, activities that you do that are prohibited in the scriptures, either for your varna and ashram, or they are prohibited completely in the scriptures. Like a Kshatriyas can kill if they are fighting in battle, so they don't get any sin out of it. A Brahman should never kill. If a Brahman kills, then the Brahman gets served. So Vikarma is based on your situation. That action is forbidden. And the third is akarma, which is the one that Krishna wants to speak. These are activities that do not result in any reaction there. So he says that so initially he sets the broad classification: karma, vikarma, and akarma. And from the next verse onwards, he will speak about akarma. Verse 18. One who sees inaction in action and action in action, this is a tongue twister. One who sees inaction in action and action in inaction is intelligent among men, and he is in the transcendental position, although engaged in all kinds of activities. So, Krishna is now trying to establish the fungibility between karma and jnana. So, one who sees inaction in action, which means that one who sees jnana in karma, and one who sees action in inaction, which means that one who sees karma in jnana. He sees things as they are. So, how does one understand this verse? How can one see jnana in karma, right? And how can one see karma in jnana? So, this verse is important because it's kind of like when I was reading this verse, I was thinking about Einstein's equation of E equal to mc square, where he establishes the conversion between matter and energy. Before him, everybody said matter is matter, energy is energy. But he said no. There is what was his theory called? Unifying theory, where he said everything is unified. So this verse is a little bit like that, where in our mind we think karma is karma and jnana is jnana, but Krishna is saying that in karma you can see jnana and in jnana you can see karma. So how is that possible? And the acharyas explain that when you do your prescribed duty, when you do your karma, then the execution of those duties gives you realizations. And that is where karma actually generates jnana. And when you have those realizations, you act upon those realizations. And that's how jnana generates karma. So Krishna at this point leaves it over here, but he will further expand, because this is an important notion. So he'll further expand it in later, I think 33rd verse, he'll expand it more. But the basic point that he's making is, through the performance of your prescribed duties, you can have access to jnana. And we all have experience with this, that when we take to Krishna consciousness, then maybe we start off by, somebody tells us that why don't you chant a few rounds, and we start chanting. So when we chant, then through the process of chanting, we develop an attraction to Krishna consciousness as a whole. So we then make inquiry, what else can we do? Somebody says do deity worship, and we start doing deity worship. Somebody says, serve the devotees, we start serving the devotees. So in this way we see that something that was initially knowledge gets converted into activity. Right? We see that in our own lives. And I don't want to stress too much on that, because that is bhakti. Bhakti follows a whole different path, but notionally we can understand that even people who are in the process of, who are not really following bhakti, but who are in karma kand, who are doing activities because they are prescribed. That the family piece, the Purohit or your spiritual master tells you that as per the Vedas, do this and don't do this. Don't commit sinful activities, give in charity, help the poor. And then as you do it, based on the instructions, then the desire in you to find out more automatically comes up. And then you say, what else do the Vedas say? And then the spiritual master might say, the Vedas also say that you should chant. And then you chant and then say, what else do the Vedas say? So in this way we see how karma and gyan, they are nourishing one another. Next verse, 19. One is understood to be in full knowledge, whose every endeavor is devoid of desire for sense gratification. He is said by sages to be a worker for whom the reactions have been burned up by the fire of perfect knowledge. So here Krishna is establishing the condition for this conversion of karam to gyan. And the condition is that whose endeavor is devoid of the desire for sense gratification. So as long as you're doing activities with a desire to enjoy, then the knowledge aspect of the activity will not come. Only when these activities are done in a mode of detachment, then those activities have the potential of generating gyan. Yes, Prabhu.
So, performing prescribed duties can lead to jnana. Is it also the case that if you're not performing prescribed duties, then it can destroy intelligence?
It's a good point, and yes, the answer is unequivocally yes. That the performance of sinful activities have the nature of taking you to a downward spiral. That you perform a little bit, and then it destroys your sense of discrimination, and you perform more of it. And then it further destroys your sense of morality, and you perform even more of it. So it actually happens both ways. Okay. Verse 20, abandoning all attachment to the results of his activities, ever satisfied and independent, he performs no fruitive activities, although engaged in all kinds of undertakings. So this is the position of a person who has. So now Krishna is going through levels of detachment. So this is the first level of detachment, even though it's very exalted, but from a perspective of detachment, it is the ground floor, the basic level, which is called karma phal tyag. That you do some activity, because of that activity you get some result, and then you give out that result. So charity is an example of that. That because of your activity you get some money, you give that money to somebody else. You say, okay. So a person might say that I did this activity, I'm getting the money, I should enjoy it. But the first level of detachment is that even though I did the activity, even though this came to me, but let me not get too much attached to the fruits of the activity. So this is the first level of detachment. So Krishna has spoken to Arjuna the importance of being detached to transcend from karma to gyan. So now he is talking about what is detachment. So he says karma phal tyag is that you renounce the fruits of your activities. So such a person is known as a sadhaka, one who is practicing detachment, who's doing detachment 101, basic detachment. The next verse speaks about a siddha, one who is far more advanced in the process of detachment. Such a man of understanding acts with mind and intelligence perfectly controlled, giving up all sense of proprietorship over his possession, and acts only for the bare necessities of life. Thus working, he is not affected by sinful reactions. So the previous verse was one who gave up the attachment to the fruits of the activity, this is a person who gives up the attachment to the activity. So even though we may give up the fruits, attachment to the fruits, we may still think that I am the doer. So there are two modes, that I am the enjoyer and I am the doer. So even though we may give up the mood that I am the enjoyer, but we may still attach to the notion that I am doing this. That because of me, this wealth has been generated. Because of me, this temple has been created. So even though the money is being given away in charity, but you're still attached to the activity. So this is a siddha who does not even develop any attachment to the activity. So remember Krishna when he said Chaturvarnya Maya Seshta Guna Karma Vibhagasha, he said Kartaham, that even though I am the doer, he says I am the non-doer. So he had given himself as an example of a person who is completely detached from both the activity and the fruits of the activity. So here he is inspiring Arjun to be at that stage, to not only renounce the fruits of the activity, but also to renounce the sense of proprietorship on the activity. He who is satisfied with gain which comes of its own accord, who is free from duality and who does not envy, who is steady in both success and failure, is never entangled, all the performing actions. So this is Krishna summarizing the mood of detachment. So automatically with the mood of detachment, duality goes away. Because if you look at it here, what Krishna is saying is that there is no duality over here. So why does the duality go away? The duality goes away because of knowledge. Right? So you see that how Krishna is establishing that from detachment comes knowledge, and the symptom of that knowledge is that duality goes away. Because why is there duality? Duality is a symptom of nations. Duality is the symptom of that I am the body, that I am a man, I am Indian, I am this, I am that, and then you have this sense of I am this, you are that, and the duality comes. But when one is able to develop what is known as Atma Gyan, who am I in reality, then the duality goes away, and out of the elimination of the duality comes a person being anchored in their spiritual position. The work of a man who is unattached to the modes of material nature and is fully situated in transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence. So you see here Krishna is using both the verbs over here. He is using work, which is karma, and he is using transcendental knowledge and jnana. So he is establishing the fact that once a person through practicing detachment reaches the point where he is unattached to the modes of material nature, then the work that he does becomes spiritual in nature. Right? So what is the path that Krishna is taking us? You do your karma. First of all, don't do vikarma. Do karma. So be attached to the results, but at least do your prescribed duties. From there, move to the stage of karma phal tyag, where be detached from the fruits of your activity. From there, go to the stage of karma tyag, that you are detached from the activity itself. And what is the symptom of a person who has reached that stage? That he says that it is merged entirely into transcendence. That such a person's activities are no longer material; they are spiritual by nature. So much, and we see Krishna's affection for this quality of detachment right from the second chapter. As soon as Krishna starts speaking, the first quality that he starts in 2:12, he talks about the quality of the soul, and the very next verse, I think, he says, "Dhiras tatra namoyati." That who understands this nature of the soul? A dhira. A dhira is a person who is undisturbed, who is detached, equipoised. So this quality of detachment is very dear to Krishna because it is very essential in making spiritual progress. Verse 24. A person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities in which the consummation is absolute and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. So here what Krishna is doing is that he is comparing the activities of such a person to yajna. So in a yajna or a conventional yajna, there are four components. There is the person who is performing the yajna, there is the oblations that are being offered, there is somebody who is receiving the oblations, and the fourth is the reciprocation, the falstuti, what happens as a result of the performance of the yajna. So here Krishna is talking about these four things. So the jiva is the person who is performing work in detachment, and what he is offering is that work that he is performing with full detachment. So jiva is the performer of the yajna, the oblation is the activities that are performed, the receiver of the oblations is Krishna, and the reciprocation is spiritual enlightenment. So because people the yajna it's a visual picture. You see a person sitting in front of a fire, he is offering oblations, mantras are being chanted, there is a deity that is receiving the mantras. So Krishna is saying that that is why it is known as karma yajna. That in the third chapter, when Krishna introduced karma, he says yajnathat karmano nyatra lokoyam karma bandhana. That yajnathat, that do your activities as a yajnathat karmano nyatra lokoyam karma bandhana, and by that you will not be ever conditioned. So here he is saying that when a person is in this mode that he is performing duties with complete detachment, then it should be considered to be the yajna, in which Krishna is fully reciprocating with spiritual enlightenment. So I'll take a pause over here. In the next set of verses, Krishna, he wants to give an example of different kinds of yajnas that are in the category of karma and jnana. So he gives 8 examples in the 4 categories. So I'll take a break over here and see if you have any questions. Also, I'm not sure how we're doing with time. Okay, so we'll break it for today, but we'll take any questions or comments.
Probably one thing that comes to mind from the initial verses is that attachment and the fear, and then the only way is to be detached.
Yes.
To get into, to really become get more spiritual.
Right.
But what is the path to? See, we know the cause and we know the effect. But what is the path to detach? What is the way? It's not very easy to be detached. It's not very easy to let go of your fear or your anger.
Yes.
What is the path to follow?
Yeah, it's a good question. So like you said that if you look at almost all the spiritual instructions that we get, they have 2 components in them: spiritual attachment, material detachment. If you look in this 4th chapter, Krishna he began the chapter talking about himself in order to attract us. That is spiritual attachment. And then he started speaking about material detachment. Right. So your question is practical in our current context, and Bhagavad Gita, of course, it does a more rigorous approach. That it goes through each and every stage and to get it, but we understand that in our current circumstances we cannot develop detachment. because the conditionalities for detachment, performance of prescribed duties, submitting to the instructions of Guru, so they are difficult to do because the Vedas are not there. So our focus is more on spiritual attachment. So without so when a person takes formal initiation, the person gets two instructions. One is chant 16 rounds a day, and the second is do not do 4 things. That don't eat meat, don't take intoxication, no illicit sex, and no gambling. Right? So these 4 instructions are there for material detachment. And the instruction for chanting is there for spiritual attachment. It's kind of humorous that one of Prabhupada's godbrother went to London. Just as Prabhupada came to America, Prabhupada's spiritual master Bhakti Siddhant, he wanted very much to preach to the West. So he sent actually one of Prabhupada's very senior godbrother to London to preach. And he was sitting with a British member of Parliament, Lord Zetland, and who was somewhat interested in Vaishnava theology. So at one point, Lord Zetland asked him that, how can I become a disciple of Bhakti Siddhanta? And the sannyasi, he said, it's very simple. You don't do these 4 things, and then you chant. So then Lord Zetland said, if I don't do these 4 things, I have no life. So he rejected it right away, and Prabhupada mentions that just by following the 4 regulative principles, you automatically develop detachment. And through the following of the chanting, we develop spiritual attachment. But having said that, our process is that 99% we rely on the spiritual attachment. Prabhupada would give an example that if there is a glass that is full of ink and you want to put milk in it, you can do 2 things. You can empty the glass and put milk in it, so detachment, attachment, or you can take the glass as it is and keep putting milk in it until there is only milk. So we follow the second path, that we don't focus so much on detachment, but because we follow the process of spiritual attachment, then the detachment automatically happens. It's like Saturday evening, you're coming and listening to Bhagavad Gita over here and associating with devotees. So the opportunity to do something else is automatically eliminated. Because you have spiritual attachment, that detachment is coming as a byproduct. You don't have to strive for that separately. Right? Does that help?
I think there is one analogy in chemistry. If somebody from chemistry background, there is SN1 and SN2 reaction. In SN2 reaction, actually first bond comes and the next one leaves. In SN1, first you have to leaving group has to go and then next one bond is. So it's like similar, like saying first you attach to Krishna, then automatically the other one will drop.
Thank you, Prabhu. Anything else? Questions, comments?
What is the actual difference between, say, a person is religious as opposed to a person is spiritual? Is there any real difference, or is it just semantics?
It's a good question. There's a difference. Religion is how you practice dharma. So dharma, so dharma is translated as a duty, right? Whether it's your duty. So paradharma is a duty towards Krishna, and the other dharma is your conditional duties as a father or a husband. They are there. So there are certain duties that are clearly defined. Now, how you implement those duties is religion. So religion is the implementation aspect of dharma. So like we follow Vaishnava process. So in that process, there is a certain. Can we have some quiet over there? So like we. Can we have some quiet over there? Can we have some quiet over there? So like even when we worship the deities, certain way that we worship it. That's typical to the Gaudiya Sampradaya. If you go to Sri Sampradaya, they worship in a different way. Not drastically different, but in a slightly different way. Right? If you go to Christianity, they worship in a completely different way. So there are different religions or sub-religions, but dharma is the same. A person who is a sincere Christian is not different from a sincere Vaishnava, because ultimately they are doing the same thing. They are trying to re-establish a relationship with God. The Christian is following it in the way that he understands it or has been explained to him, and the Vaishnava is following in the way that has been explained to him. Right? So differences in religion are there because of differences in propensities. Right? But dharma is unified. The principles of dharma. It was interesting that last weekend I was in this Vaishnava Muslim dialogue, and but there were 4 or 5 Vaishnavas and 4 or 5 Muslim scholars, and of course those dialogues are very congenial. The focus is more on commonalities rather than difference, and the subject of the discussion was the nature of the soul. And it was interesting that as the person over there was reading his paper, then there were so many aspects that I could just relate to based on the Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam. Identical. The nature of the soul is to serve the Lord. Then you serve the Lord by serving His devotees. So very, very similar principles that they have. It's just that they're getting it from Quran and we're getting it from Gita. Right? So dharma is the same, but religion is based on time, place, and circumstance. Yeah, what else?
Just one question, the enjoying mentality Krishna talks about. So basically, because of the enjoying mentality, we are here, right? So it's kind of okay. How do you develop that? Because even if say I want to eat something, I will offer to Krishna and then eat it.
Yeah.
But still, if there is enjoying mentality, it's to give up that.
Yeah. So enjoying mentality is good. Right? The nature of the soul is
Too happy, yeah.
to be happy.
Yeah.
Enjoying separate from Krishna is not good. Right? So enjoying is good. The purpose of Krishna consciousness is not to pull our hair out or to basically put needles in our body. It's not that. Right? It's to enjoy sumptuous prasadam and associate with devotees with love and affection, sing and dance. It's enjoying. Rampal Maharaj was once sharing that he was giving a class in one of the. He does a lot of preaching in colleges. I forget which college. I think it was Boston. And one person asked him that, Swamiji, what do you do for fun? And he said that I dance, I sing, I have a lot of very good friends. I visit them. He was basically giving us a glimpse of his own life, but from in a way that he could understand that. And he said, "Oh, really? You do all that? I just thought you sat under a tree." And so enjoying is good. Enjoying separate from Krishna is where the problem comes. Yeah? So I hope you prepared some prasadam today. Just Prabhu establishes the philosophy enjoying is not good, and everywhere you get you get sukha roti and namak everywhere you go.
That was one of the Gaur Gopal Prabhu's joke was like that same, you can feed your body with just like dudhi ka sabji, dal, rice and chapati. If you eat that much, you can still maintain your body, everything nutrition, right?
Yeah.
Still you want different dishes because you want to enjoy that.
It does. It's very interesting that when we had a discussion on this, and one of the person who actually he was not a Vaishnava but he was a Hindu, and we had just had lunch prasadam, which was pretty sumptuous, and he said, "You guys are all practically spiritualists, and I had just one of the best meals that I've had in my life. So where is all this spirituality, the austerities, and all that is coming? And one of the person, Ravindra Prabhu, was there, and he says that the biggest austerity of the tongue is to eat only prasad. To only eat food that is offered to Krishna. That is the biggest austerity, right? Now, for us, it's not an austerity because we have sumptuous prasadam, right? But can you imagine that you're walking down the street, you look at something, and then you say, "This looks great," right? But you say, "Okay, it's not Krishna prasadam," and then you walk down. That's the biggest austerity.
I remember the Thursday there was Ekadashi, so in Ekadashi prasadam they make idli, Ekadashi idli.
Okay.
So it's like
Yeah.
so like there was so much prasadam on Ekadashi, like you didn't feel like
Yeah.
But isn't that
Yeah, Nidhi. Go ahead.
वैसे ऐसे पूछ रहे like कभी-कभी enjoyment के लिए movie songs भी सुन सकते हैं क्या like
So there is so Prabhu had brought this point up. There is theory and there is practice, right? So so you know where you want to go, right? You understand where you are, and then you chart a course from there. Like one of the things that is told when you're doing team building is that you have to have current reality, you have to have an understanding of vision, and based on that you basically generate what is known as creative tension. So it's more management lingo, but it's very similar to what we do is that we understand our adhikar. That what is are we pure devotees? Are we practicing devotees? Are we early stages of practicing devotees? And our adhikar is so much, right? Now, in a perfected stage, there will be no attraction for movie songs or movies or whatever it is. But we are not at that stage right now. We are aspiring to be at that stage, but we are not at that stage. So what do? That as far as possible, we keep it under control, right? So instead of like in our house, both my wife and I, we were interested in music, and when we were earlier on married, there was always some, especially 60s. We were very much into the 60s era, so there was always some song that was running of Hemant Kumar or Rafi or somebody, and then when we took to Krishna consciousness, then we replaced that with CDs of bhajans and Jagjit Singh and then devotees, etc. And again, it's not that one day we pulled it out and put it there. We still would, for a while we were listening to those songs, and then, we would listen to a little bit of Kirtan, then we listen to more of Kirtan, and then we realized that Kirtan has, much more in it, so we listen to even more Kirtan. So it's just a process. Getting into spirituality is like going to the gym. Right? Every day you lift a little bit heavier, every day you run a little bit longer. So you're building your spirituality muscles that way. But for a person who immediately wants to go to that stage, you're still not strong and you want to, I don't know, I've never gone to the gym, but like if you want to lift 100 pounds or, whatever it is, it's going to pull your muscles, it's going to hurt you, right? So you want to do 20 pounds first and that way, right? That is the way that, because Rampal Maharaj gives this example that we are not sprinters, we are marathon runners, right? So we are not going to for 3 days we'll chant 64 rounds and fast and all that, and then after that we'll open a bottle of cognac and and say that we are done. We are not that. We are marathon runners. We pace ourselves, we grow our stamina, because this is something that we'll be doing for the rest of our life, and the life after that, and for eternity. This is something that we'll be doing. So that's how we pace ourselves. Okay. We can have the kids come for the kirtan.
One more question. Krishna says here that we are not the enjoyer. Right? Krishna is the only enjoyer. So now we talk about enjoying mentality. We say it's okay to be enjoyed. So how do I understand that? Because I always confuse. If Krishna is the enjoyer, then I'm not the enjoyer.
Right. Right. So it again comes back to the same conception. Are you enjoying with Krishna or separate from Krishna? Right. So when Krishna says that I am the enjoyer, then he is the primary enjoyer. Like there is this pastime that when the gopis are with Krishna, then they enjoy from serving Krishna. When they see Krishna enjoying the service, then their enjoyment increases. And when Krishna sees their enjoyment increasing, his enjoyment increases. And in this way there is a transcendental competition which Krishna always loses. The devotees always win that competition. So same way, we are after enjoyment. We are not after we are not Shunyavadis. We are not Mayavadis. We are after enjoyment. But we are enjoyment with Krishna. Yeah? Okay, thank you very much.